Pod Apostle. Help us build the kingdom. Like, share, and subscribe. So I was reading a little bit about this first reading. We hold this treasure in earthen vessels, that the surpassing power may be of God and not from us. The earthen vessel. In the Old Testament, some of the sacrifices were offered in bronze vessels, and some of them were offered in earthen vessels. And if the sacrifice was offered in an earthen vessel, after it was done, the earthen vessel had to be destroyed. Okay? Now, what was in the earthen vessel was sacred, but the vessel itself would just go back to the earth, if you will. And so St. Paul is comparing our body to that earthen vessel. And what is in us that is this sacred gift of grace in us, right? But even our bodies have a dignity both in life and in death. And it really is it's a great gift to us, our bodies, but our bodies are really second to the treasure that is contained within us, the life of God, the grace of God given to us. And so St. James and his brother, there's another episode given in a different gospel. And obviously, James and John and their mom approached Jesus together, because in the other episode, James and John asked him. But in this one, it's mom is stepping up to say, hey, I want you to do something good for my boys, And Jesus says, you don't know what you're asking. Sometimes we pray, right? And we don't know what we're asking. And I think, in my own life experience, I think I've learned that upon reflection. I think most of us can probably look back and see where we didn't know what we were asking. And, and so sometimes we're just reduced to saying, thy will be done, right? Because we don't know. Thy will be done. So they asked to sit one at my right and one at my left. You don't know what you're asking. Can you drink the chalice I'm going to drink? And the chalice, over and over again in the Old Testament, is a cup of wrath. It is a symbol of kind of the justice of God visiting the injustice of humanity. That's the chalice of God's wrath. Okay, that's not an unusual Old Testament allusion. And when Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, he mentions the cup, right? That's the cup. That's the cup. So he says, can you drink the cup that I'm going to drink? Can you come to the garden with me? And I think he asks all of us that. Can you come to the garden with me? And they said, yes. And he said, you will. You will. And so James wants to be first, James and John. So John is John the Evangelist, St. John, the author of the fourth gospel, the beloved disciple. They want to be first, right? Guess what James got to be first at? He was the first one to be martyred. He was the first one whose earthen vessel would have returned to the earth. And then John, who also wanted to be first. What do we hear about him? He and Peter ran to the tomb, right? And who got to the tomb first? John did, but he stepped aside and let Peter go in. And so we have this episode of wanting to be first and understanding the nature of following Christ and going to the garden. But I want to return briefly to the first reading, because just as I was listening to it this morning, We are perplexed, but we don't despair. We are persecuted, but God never abandons us. We are struck down, but even being struck down, we're not destroyed. We carry about in us the dying of Jesus, that the life of Jesus would be in us. Beautiful reflection. And you know, as we think about St. James's death, I'm wearing the red vestments of the martyr. We should think about our own death. You know, you think about a grain of sand. This is one of my favorite thoughts. I mean, I have the privilege of living next to the beach. I see the sand blowing across the road all the time, and I think about this a lot. Maybe more than I should. Our life is like a grain of sand. I mean, in the eternal universe, it's that tiny. It is a moment in time. It can't even be measured against eternity. And we fall in love with this world. But let us fall in love with Christ as we carry this great treasure in this earthen vessel.